This lesson covers some of the historical context and the thematic context for the Iliad. You need to be cued in to the mystery of the Iliad, specifically the influences of oral tradition on what we know about the Iliad. The Mycenaean period, written copy, influences, especially those influences on the Iliad of the Dark Age, the Archaic period, and the Bronze Age. Know why we consider the Iliad historical fiction, who the credited author is, and the conflict of the Iliad, both in the legend of Troy and Agamemnon's conflict with Achilles. Because of the nature of the epic as part of oral tradition, there is a lot about the Iliad that remains unknown, both about its creation and the events that it describes. In this sense, the Iliad is a bit of a mystery. The earliest oral creation, first telling of the Iliad, the date for that remains unknown, was likely developed during the Mycenaean period between 2000 and 1200 BCE. This is indicated through references to bronze weapons and the Bronze Age, as during which time the city of Mycenae was the main power in the Greek Empire. Also, fortifications such as those described as being possessed by Troy were constructed during this period. The first written copy of the Iliad is generally accepted as being recorded in the last half of the 8th century. This is something you should know. The first written copy of the Iliad was written in the last half of the 8th century. Because of oral tradition, the narrative reflects the elements of several subsequent time periods, not just the one it was first told in. We can see the addition of the Dark Age. And this influence is shown in the use of heroic poetry, which was developed by the Ionians in the Asia Minor, and this poetry centered around legendary figures and events, including the Trojan War. Essentially, they created epic poetry in the form that we're used to seeing it. We also saw during the Archaic period the construction of large-scale temples, including the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi. And the Oracle of Apollo is somebody who features in the early backstory to the Trojan legend that's covered in the Iliad. So we know that that portion came from a later date than the first oral telling. Additionally, during the Archaic period, they adopted the Phoenician alphabet, which was what was used to first write the Iliad. So this came about during the colonization of the Archaic period. In summary, the Dark Age influenced the creation of the Iliad by developing the tradition of heroic poetry that we see as the epic. And the Archaic period gave us settings like the temple at the Oracle of Delphi and the Phoenician alphabet that recorded the legend itself. We consider this historical fiction in that it is likely certain events, people, and places depicted in the Iliad did exist. We see the use of Bronze Age weapons through the Iliad. We know those are historically accurate descriptions for weapons that we have discovered with archaeological efforts. Later, the fighting techniques come from later eras, but again, we have historical records talking about those actual fighting practices, so those are authentic and historically accurate, just blended together for multiple times. Your kingdom descriptions are associated with the culture of the Dark Age, where little kingdoms were broken into, the whole country was broken into little kingdoms, like the kingdom of Mycenae and Pythia and Ithaca. Those are all smaller countries within the larger country, all part of Greece, but this is something that comes from the Dark Age. These are also influences on the telling of the Iliad itself. We also know that the city of Troy does exist. The archaeological site was discovered by Heinrich Schliemann, and he used topographical details provided in the Iliad. He found this in the late 19th century. Granted, his archaeological efforts were not considered ethical or desirable, but this site has since been verified again and again. Troy actually exists in a location equivalent to modern-day Turkey, somewhere in that region. It has another name. You can find that later. The conflict, however, is most likely fictionalized. in that it is less likely that the Trojan War was fought over a beautiful woman and more historically likely to have been a dispute over trade routes to the Black Sea. We cannot pin down a single author because of oral tradition. We don't have a written record that say, hey, so-and-so told this story first. And more than that, the evolutionary nature of an oral tradition narrative makes it combine elements from all types of eras and societies in that culture. So this probably has more than one actual author in terms of different parts of the story coming from different people. But the credited author is Homer, who is an epic poet and well-known poet in ancient Greek society. He's credited with both the Iliad and the Odyssey. There is another epic poem covering roughly the same era and peoples. It's called the Aeneid, but that was actually written by Virgil. Homer wrote the Odyssey and the Iliad, as far as we credit him. The conflict of the Iliad is twofold. One, we have an overarching conflict that focuses on the legend of Troy, wherein Paris took off with Helen, who happens to be the wife of Menelaus, younger brother of Agamemnon, and everybody got hissy and went after her because who wouldn't want the most beautiful woman in the world living in your kingdom? The Trojan horse is what concludes this conflict, in that Odysseus recommends the Trojan horse as a ruse to get into the city of Troy, and they are then able to sack it and take Helen back. The conflict of the Iliad itself focuses on a dispute between two powerful men, King Agamemnon of Mycenae, overarching king of all of Greece in many ways, and Achilles, a lesser king of Pythia, and a great warrior and demigod. He is well known as a hero, and both men are considered very important to the Greek society. This brings up issues of pride on Agamemnon's and Achilles' part, and anger management. Both of them have issues with that. So this is where we get that theme being developed in the Iliad. For additional information on the historical nature of the city of Troy and the Trojan War, there is an additional YouTube video. It's a documentary. It's about 48 minutes, posted in the Blend Space lesson that contains this lecture. I will give bonus points to anyone who submits a short essay detailing 3 facts about the historical nature of the city of Troy. You do need to be responsible for the others, and you should be prepared for a quiz. That will be tomorrow.